Thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to extend a very, very warm welcome to all of you that you are here this afternoon. I know this is the first of such a debate to be held in Nandi, and we hope that it's going to be not going to be the last one. Hopefully, there will be more awareness on this debate at a later date. And firstly, I would like to welcome and thank our panelists who are up here in front. I'm sure you know them all. I will be introducing them later on. We also have members of parliament. Here we have a Minister for Defense who is sitting somewhere there as well. Welcome. And also the speakers. We have a speaker. I have two colleagues here, the speaker from Cook Islands and also the speaker from the Marshall Islands. Thank you very much for your presence. With us here are representatives from members of parliament from Bhutan. We have somebody from Bhutan sitting right here. Welcome to Fiji especially. And we have them from Tonga, Vanuatu, Samoa, Marshall Islands, Kiribati, Tuvalu, Cook Islands, and Fiji. They are here as observers, and I really warmly welcome you. Those of you who know me well know that I'm really very passionate about development issues, particularly the Sustainable Development Goals. I know we've had the Millennium Development Goals. There are only 8 MDGs, and I'm sure a lot of us don't even know what are these 8 MDGs. Now they are moving on to SDGs, and now we have 17 SDGs. And the whole world is wanting everyone in the population to know Sustainable Development Goals, because all our development programs are all geared towards achieving the goals that have been set up through the UN, but by the people ourselves. Including we have been involved also in the carving of these Sustainable Development Goals. Also, we would like to have this speakers debate as an opportunity for the people or the population to engage with the parliamentarians. We have 2 parliamentarians here, one from the government and also the opposition, and also from the academia and civil society organizations, from the teachers' organizations as well. An opportunity for you to engage with them and question them on where we are in the theme, on the SDG theme that we are addressing. And today's SDG theme, of course, you know, is on education, and that is SDG what? We have 17 SDGs. And to do with education is SDG 4. So for all of you who are in the education, you have to be familiar with all these SDGs. Before I go into the details of the format of today's event, I would like to just outline how we're going to go about it. Education is, of course, the key development of any country, and the SDG 4 commits to ensure inclusive and equitable quality and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. So all of you who are here today, you know of this theme, and I know that you're here because you are passionate about the education of our population. I really would like to thank you for your presence. And of course, the title of today's debate is Fiji's education system effectively contributing to the country's sustainable development? And I will repeat, is Fiji's education system effectively contributing to the country's sustainable development? The format for the debate will be that I will introduce each panelist, and then each will speak on the topic for up to 7 minutes. You will be given a 1 minute. I do in Parliament, your question, please, I want to hear the question. So please formulate your questions beforehand. And you'll be given just about half a minute to ask your question. We will then open up the floor for questions from the audience. Those watching the debate on the live stream, this debate is being live streamed, can send their questions to the panel through the Parliament Facebook page or Twitter account. Usually, come question time, my staff will bring me all the questions that they have received on Facebook and on Twitter.
The Honorable Speaker of Parliament, fellow panelists, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, Nisambula Vinaka, and greetings to you all. My fellow Fijians, I believe to achieve sustainable development through education, everyone needs to be included, irrespective of gender, age, or race. There are certain reforms which the ministry has taken in alignment with few targets of SDGs 4 to contribute to the country's sustainable development. Pillar 1 of the ministry reforms talks about the establishment of technical college campuses around Fiji, which not only accounts for 10th grade school leavers, but do offer short courses for night classes. These night classes are being attended not only by school leavers, but adults alike. Thus, it is conspicuous that our youths and adults are also of concern to have relevant skills for employment, decent jobs, or they can even start their own small businesses, which is an SDG target. In the primitive days, there were certain subjects which were viewed as suitable for a particular gender only. For instance, agriculture and applied technology were subjects seen as to be taken by males, and home economics for females. However, as equal citizenry is being promoted, this eliminates gender disparities in education. Students now have the privilege to take subjects they would want to pursue a career in. Moreover, issuing of scholarships are no longer finalized in accordance to male-female ratio, but an open merit system. Many schools at present now even have female administrators, which would have been impossible 15 years back. The automatic progression of students into Year 12, as stated in the Ministry Reforms Pillar 1, ensures a complete secondary education to all girls and boys, hence increasing the literacy rate. This has been made possible with the issue of free textbooks and free bus fare vouchers, which everyone is aware of. The major contribution of the education system through the attainment of primary and secondary education, in my opinion, is its curriculum. Climate change is now a rising concern, and the Curriculum Development Unit is doing everything within its means to ensure that learners from a very early age know about the environment that we live in and the resources that we rely on through its curriculum in science, geography, and social science, to name a few. Here, students learn about environmental issues and are being taught strategies on how to combat its effects on people and the environment. For instance, in agriculture science, organic farming is a unit whereby major emphasis is placed, as this will lead to sustainable agriculture. There can be advancement in technology. Nevertheless, we need to preserve the environment that we live in for the future generation. As youths are the leaders of tomorrow, the major system that they are involved in today is the education system. With the government initiatives, as mentioned earlier, it ensures and tremendously contributes to the country's sustainable development by educating learners today methods to conserve our natural resources for future use. As such, the National Topper Scheme under the government priority areas account for certain fields which would aid in sustaining our natural resources. For instance, in the field of agriculture, fisheries, and forestry, the government is offering scholarships in plant pathology, aquaculture, fish technology, etc., as these areas account for our livelihood. In environment and marine science, scholarships offered focuses on applied climatology and environmental science, as climate change is now evident. Hence, scientific support in areas such as climate change mitigation, aquaculture, and agroforestry are of priority in the aim of preserving our natural resources, which is boosted by the education system. So we see the education system, which involves the automatic progression of students to Year 12, elimination of gender disparities, increasing number of youths and adults who have relevant skills, are just to ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development. Therefore, to realize the ambition of transforming our world, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, there is a pressing need for scientific support to current and future efforts, which can be offered by sustainability science. At present, the education system is playing a good role in contributing to the country's sustainable development and maybe even better in the future. I thank the Speaker and the Parliament of the Republic of Fiji for organizing this panel discussion, as it allows Fijians to discuss issues that affect us, and I am honored to be one of the panelists. Once again, thank you. You all have a good evening. God bless you, and God bless Fiji.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be here this afternoon to speak on the issue of education and its contribution to sustainable development. Before I start, let me say that I was expecting the Honourable Minister for Education to be here. Unfortunately, he's not. Because he would have had to answer some difficult questions that might have been posed by both the panelists and members in the audience. Nonetheless, I welcome Honorable Rosie Akbar, and I'm sure she'll do a good job. When you look at our education system, in fact, Fiji has a history of a very good education system. We started that in the 1970s. And in many ways, in the 70s and in the 80s, the focus was mainly on access. And I think Fiji achieved remarkable progress around those 2 decades. And many of the development plans from 1970 right up to 1986 had education as a major focus, and in that we had issues of quality and access going together. So when we look at those 2 decades, in fact, in the 1970s, our poverty rate was 7%. And even in the 1970s and the 80s, we had what we call remission of fees. So the idea of free education, the idea of governments supporting education of children from poor background has always been a feature of post-independence Fiji. So what we have now is a poverty rate of about 28 to 32%. We can argue with those figures. And the other 30% of households in this country are just above the poverty line. So if you look at the percentage of households in hardship, you're actually looking at about 60%. And I think the recognition that more children need support through government has been appreciated, and I think the scaling up of tuition grants to schools and free bus fare is commendable. But it's also a reflection of the growing number of people, families, and the children living in hardship. The other feature which has made our education system very sustainable, and in fact, which made it very, very inclusive, is the partnership that we had between the parents, the teachers, including teacher unions, community organizations, religious and cultural organizations. People don't know that in Fiji, 99% of the schools are owned by community, religious, and cultural organizations. And in fact, if you look at the contribution of these organizations, historically, if anybody in this country that has provided free education to our kids, it's these organizations and the people who contributed out of their pockets to build all the schools that we see throughout the country today. The role of the government has always been to provide quality teachers and quality curriculum. Unfortunately, the Bainimarama government, the military government, and continued by the elected government, has actually not bothered to look at those partnerships. In many countries, where 99% of the schools are owned by government spend money. They try and get the community to be involved in the school. Here we have that partnership. We had a very inclusive partnership. And unfortunately, under this Minister for Education, who is not here today, we have seen that partnership broken. He's gone ahead and created another school management group. He's dictating from the Ministry of Education what teacher unions and all the collaborative, the cohesion building institutions within the Ministry of Education, where the community, where the teachers union, where the parents were able to participate, has been broken. And I'm glad recently the Attorney General made the decision to actually remove the minister's own creation of an internal tribunal to deal with disciplinary issues. So when we look at the issue of sustainable development goal, and if you look at the goals that are there, you will find that to make education sustainable, that partnership is very, very important. And what we see in the Sustainable Development Goal is the operative word of quality and skills. And unfortunately, we have not focused on the quality of curriculum and the quality of teachers. In fact, the last Education Commission that we had in this country, where experts actually looked at what happened within the education system over a period of time, was done in 2000. It's almost 15 years now that we haven't looked at in detail through the eyes and skills of those who have the expertise in curriculum, in education generally, to look at whether certain policies have worked or not. Because a lot of the policies like exams were reversed that were undertaken by the Bainimarama government during the military rule has been reversed by this government without any analysis. So the Minister for Education, half a minute, Madam Speaker, had promised in the first session of Parliament on the 15th of October that he was going to set up an education commission. And obviously he's gone back on that promise and he's not talking about that commission. I call upon him, and I think it's important for us as a country to have that education commission to understand what are the nuances, what are the difficulties, what are the problems, so that we can have a very clear idea and clear solutions to the problems. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Fellow panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank Madam Speaker, first of all, for inviting me to be part of this session here. To speak about education in 7 minutes is, of course, impossible. Take more than 7 hours. Let me begin by saying that I agree with a few things that Professor Honorable Prasad has said about partnership. That was my first point that I had noted. The partnership that actually is needed for all of us to be able to contribute meaningfully to uplift the quality of education has unfortunately totally eroded in the last 2 years. And this is a very sad state of affairs. I must also acknowledge the contribution of the school management that is now not being recognized. And the worst part is that there are sweeping statements made against school managements in the media. School managements are misappropriating. School managements are abusing funds. School managements are not working the way they should be. We are going to do this. We are going to do that. There are 900 school managements, almost 900 schools in this country, ladies and gentlemen. And they've been managing these schools for almost a century now and doing an excellent job. And we are products of those schools. I think there is more dignity required to be given to these school managements. If there is some lack of literacy, financial literacy, and other management skills, then they need to be assisted with that. That is what is important. We've got to be positive with it rather than being negative with it. Similarly, when it comes to the partnership of the teacher unions have always been working with the ministry because we have a passion to see that the quality of education is uplifted in the country. We have contributed to curriculum development. We have contributed to policies. We have always been there. But all those structures of consultation don't exist anymore. We all exist in different compartments in solitude. And that is why we are not able to work cohesively as a team. So we need that partnership, and I'm also calling upon the Honorable Minister to come on board. We are coming with open arms to work together to see that we are able to meet those sustainable development goals through teamwork and partnership. Inclusivity is what is important. Education also requires, quality education requires quality resources, ladies and gentlemen. And when we talk about resources, of course, I must acknowledge the kind of funding that has been budgeted for by the government in the last few years, the per capita grant, etc. While the per capita grant is there, for example, $250 per child for each school, in between that grant gets manipulated. It is not, the schools do not get the per capita grant per se. Some of the larger schools, grants have been taken away to be given to other schools. We don't say those other schools don't need them, but per capita means per capita. You don't rob Paul to pay Peter. You give that extra that is needed by others, but don't take away what the others, those who have been allocated, what they have been allocated, because they planned according to that. I have seen that happen. Ladies and gentlemen, then it comes to the teachers. The most important resource are the teachers. So how do you get quality teachers? The first thing you do is to attract quality students into the training colleges, in the universities. How do you attract them? You attract quality people when you have quality remuneration. The reality of the world is we want to go into a profession that is going to give us a decent livelihood. So that is also important. Then you'll get the best students coming for teacher training. And once they are trained as teachers, the progressive in-service training is very important. We need to increase our budgetary allocation for in-service training for teachers. There are teachers out there in the rural and maritime schools who do not have that opportunity because they do not have access to the universities where they can pursue courses to uplift their qualification, to upgrade their qualification. They may be teaching there for 10, 20, 15 years, and they never had an opportunity for a single professional development opportunity. Now, it is dynamic. The challenges are dynamic. We need to upgrade ourselves regularly to be able to be at par with the developments that are taking place in teaching, learning, in pedagogy, in curriculum. That's quality teacher. You also need to see that the morale of your teachers is good. How do you keep the morale of your teachers? There is something called people management. People management means you also make some positive remarks about people when they do good. It's a basic human nature. You don't always at every opportunity try to say, I'll fix you up. Or I'll do this. I'll discipline you. I will demote you. I will transfer you. That doesn't help, ladies and gentlemen. That doesn't help. There are people who need that. You know how to do it. But don't generalize it. Don't generalize it. That is what is very, very important. And we have seen that being the order of the day. The notorious DSB, the Disciplinary Services Board, that some perception of the ministry that under the Constitution they had the right to do it. It had to be disbanded. And there are a number of victims of that. People have been demoted, people have been terminated, people are suffering, their families are suffering because of this. Teachers are living in fear. They don't know when the investigator will come, the CID will come, and when they will be demoted or disciplined. So that's a serious matter. Ladies and gentlemen, Tibet is a very important area. We have technical vocational schools, and these technical vocational schools are a great idea. But when you go into the technical vocational schools, what we need to improve on, if we want to have that quality there, the lecturers of quality, the resources of quality, that is what is lacking. We talk to the lecturers. Secondary school teachers have been taken out, put into the technical colleges as lecturers. Their status has changed, their remuneration has changed, the hours have become longer, the load has become harder, nothing else for them. and the resources. We need the resources. Our schools need to become disability friendly, ladies and gentlemen. We have our people who are part of this nation. We have to get our physical environment to become disability friendly. I think that is very, very important. We need to work in that direction as well. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I want to go back to partnership. I want to call upon the minister again that we develop that partnership, get that transparency in dealing with teachers. There is a perception that there is nepotism. There is a perception that there is favoritism. There is a perception that there are some favorites. There are perception that some people can tell senior people off because they are close to some big people. All these things must go. The rot must go.
Your concluding
Then,
remarks, please.
These are my concluding remarks, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope my time starts now. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to be here to replace the Honourable Minister for Education. I'm the Minister for Health, but I have 23 years of experience being in the education field as a career civil servant and, of course, going through the primary and secondary school system in Fiji. Coming back to today's topic, is Fiji's education system effectively contributing to the country's sustainable development goals? I think we are in the right direction. And I'd like to make a few comments in regards to Mr. Singh's statements. And I think, Mr. Singh, recently you've had a very successful negotiations with the Attorney General in disbanding the disciplinary tribunal. And that itself shows that we are in the right direction. And I've also been told that you are having some future meetings next month. And that's also in the right direction. And I've also been told, but still, with the government. And I've also been told that job evaluation exercise is in progress. And hopefully the remuneration you're talking about for teachers and attracting them, boosting their morale, again, in the right direction. Coming back to some other issues, I've also been told that the in-service training has also been started. So that will give your teachers, yeah, that's the latest I've got. And anyways, we as a government, ladies and gentlemen, believe that investing in the education of our children is the way forward for our country. And as mentioned by our student rep, there are a lot of programs that the government has initiated to see that we have access, that we ensure access to quality educations. And for that, for all children till year 12, we have made education free. Dr. Biman Prasad made some statements about, yes, there were remissions before, we agreed to that. Your rates on poverty levels in the country can be disputed, so we will stick to the 28% of people living in poverty in Fiji. And with that, we should not forget the other assistance that is provided to those families living in poverty, as stated by the HIES report. And we, as a government, we have made sure that Fijians have accessibility to preschool, primary and secondary schools. And by doing that, we have taken a lot of burden off the shoulders of the parents. I myself was raised by a single mother, and I know the difficulties my mother had to face when she had to pay her school fees. Many a times I was told to go back home to get the school fees. So I'm very much grateful that I am part of this government that believes that all children must be in school and that it has to be a shared responsibility between parents and children. And we look forward for that partnership with parents and other stakeholders to see that our children remain in schools. And the government is here to look after that. Another mention was the scholarship schemes that we have in place, rewarding toppers. That is not on racial lines anymore. Anybody who works hard will qualify for the topper scheme. And of course, we have the tertiary education loan scheme that also provides assistance to those families where children wish to pursue tertiary education but are unable to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, there were times when families' entire savings would be put towards or used towards putting children to tertiary education. We have tried to take the burden off that, and we'd like to encourage all children to work hard in schools and take advantage of that. With that, there's also talk about inclusive education. Yes, we have invested heavily in inclusive education for people with disabilities and handicap, and work is in progress. Technical colleges was also mentioned. Just a few information on that. We have currently 13 technical colleges and of Fiji campuses all over Fiji, and operating remarkably well, with some witnessing the pioneer graduation. And this gives opportunities to thousands of children to upskill and join the working force. On that, we have also provided quality, equitable education through removal of racial names of schools, supporting schools to intake children of all racial backgrounds, like I said, having a standardized scholarship and loan scheme for all Fijians. The topper scheme and loan schemes are not based on racial lines like previous scholarship schemes. So we're in the right direction. Gender equality, yes, is another very vital component of the SDGs, and we have addressed that to ensure that boys and girls are given the same opportunities in school, and they have options to choose the subjects that they wish to do. We have girls doing technical drawing, etc., and we have boys doing homework, which used to be for girls in our time, and other technical subjects used to be boys. So we have a policy where we are not going to leave any child behind, and that's also that. Curriculum, yes, we have relooked at our curriculum and transformed it to suit the needs of our country and its role in the modern world. Our syllabus were outdated and obsolete, and we have developed better frameworks and inculcated greater student-oriented learning outcomes, combined with more focus on quality holistic education or quality lifelong learning opportunities. Currently, we are in the process of upgrading infrastructures and services in schools, uplifting IT services, and digitalizing education, of course, to maintain global quality standards. Digital literacy, such as one digital device per child, will definitely support child-centered learning. We are also tapping into the provision of quality early childhood education, which basically lays the foundation for the child's long-term development. And lifelong learning, ladies and gentlemen, our education goals also encompass life skills which complement and support formal schooling. That's the problem. Okay, I'll have to go fast. These are some of the things, and in conclusion, I would just like to say that the government of the day with the Ministry of Education stands strongly to deliver the SDG 4 on Education 2030, and we are focusing greatly on access, inclusion, equity, and quality at all levels. We will ensure that all people, irrespective of race, sex, age, color, status, language, religion, all those with disabilities, especially those in vulnerable situations, will have access to quality, equitable education. In the past 2 years, we have changed our education system, particularly to align to the SDG 4s and towards our national aspirations. The outcome is there for all to see. Of course, when there is a change, we expect people to resist and question, and because we are not used to it. However, 2 years from now on, I think we are on target to meet our SDGs. Again, coming back to the question of teachers teaching in fear, I also travel across the country, and I also get to meet a lot of administrators and teachers who are quite happy with the change. It's up to the administrators to mold their staff to adjust to changes. Of course, resistance will be there, but if it's for the good, I would urge people to look at things in a very positive note and see how best we can put politics aside and let's take education forward for our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, distinguished panelists, and ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for the opportunity to maybe present a very different perspective during this debate. I'd like to spend a little bit time on the word sustainable development just to help myself be on the same page. And we all know that this word sustainable development has been defined in many different ways. But a big chunk of it and what it entails is really, everybody talks about the economy, about the environment, about the community and the society. But I, with your permission, took a very simplified version and demystifying this word to make it a bit easier for myself to be able to present the perspective. And I thought basically sustainable development, in my opinion, means to build a better future that meets the needs of the present without really compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And education obviously plays a major role in this. The premise that we have for the education for sustainable development, as many of us know, it's about enabling us to constructively and creatively address present and future global challenges and create a more equitable, peaceful, prosperous, and resilient society that not only contributes to social and economic growth, which Sustainable Development really talks about, but also to the betterment of the world. I started asking some questions, and I'll be posing these questions. In thinking through about sustainable development and building this better future, I was wondering, is Fiji's education system actually is driving success in school and life? Does it reduce social costs and deficits and strengthen the economy? Does it promote equality and ensure equity? And most of all, does it instill values that motivates one to serve, basically serving humanity, and be a productive member of society? Then I thought about what investment has been made in the education system that can produce or at least ignite some of these results. Is there a magic bullet? And if there is Fiji investing in this magic bullet? And then I looked at some of the work of experts in the economists, such as James Heckman, who is a Nobel laureate in economics and expert in economics and human development. And he has found this magic bullet. And this is what I want to share with you. He says that those seeking to reduce deficit and strengthen the economy should make a significant investment in early childhood education. And he says, based on his research and analysis and the longitudinal studies that he has done, he says, for every $1 US that any country invests in quality early childhood education, you get $7 back. And in fact, some studies shows more than that. It also shows that children that they followed from 3, 4, 5-year-olds up to age 26, they noticed that most of these children finished their university, most of them were employed, most of them were in their marriage, most of them had better social responsibility, and most of them actually had less incidents with law. So then I said, if the youngest learners in Fiji are deprived of early stimulation and learning, if they are deprived of good nutrition, if they are deprived of protection against violence, abuse, neglect, and exploitation, then clearly we are all setting ourselves for a very weak foundation in sustainable development. A foundation with deficit in skills and abilities that basically pulls down productivity and increases the social costs, thereby adding to the financial deficits borne by the public. I was pleasantly surprised last year, exactly May 2015, when I saw all these headlines in Fiji's local newspapers: free kindergarten for all children. I think by taking this action of having the universal pre-primary education, which incidentally is one of the targets of the SDG 4, Fiji has managed to provide its youngest citizens a head start and building the foundation for sustainable development. While this is a new investment, and we all have to be very vigilant to make sure that the most marginalized children will benefit from this investment, and the quality is going to be maintained, in my opinion, with just this one key investment in the education system, Fiji has managed to put itself on the right track for sustainable development. Thank you.
The Honorable Madam Chair, Honorable Ministers, fellow panelists, and audience. Education is an essential tool for achieving sustainability. It is evident that the current economic development trends are positive. These trends can be further accelerated with the need public awareness, education, and training society towards sustainability. For Fiji, The government has in place positive policies in place to contribute effectively to sustainable development. However, at the operation level, there is a need to tie up this policy at various institution level so we have better coordination, reducing repetition of what we do. Improvement is the key argument. This debate is focused on the use of education as a tool to achieve sustainability. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Sustainable development generally has three components: environment, society, and economy. These concepts are intertwined when it comes to sustainability. The sustainability is a paradigm for thinking about the future in which environment, societal, and economic consideration are balanced in the pursuit for development and improved quality of life. The concept of resource consumption and population are major issues when it comes to sustainability. An increase in either two of these concepts jeopardize sustainability. On the contrary, when the education levels are low, economies are often limited to resource extraction and agriculture. This knowledge gap severely hinders a sustainable development plan of the nation, as higher education is imperative in creating more sustainable industries. The relationship between education and sustainable development is complex. Research indicates that basic education is fundamental to a nation's ability to develop and achieve sustainability targets. Research has shown that the education improves agriculture productivity, enhances the status of women, enhances environment protection, and generally raises the standard of living. For instance, in relation to resource usage and agriculture, literacy and numeracy allows farmers to adapt to new agriculture methods, cope with risk, and respond to market signals. Literacy also helps farmers mix and apply chemicals according to manufacturers' direction, thereby reducing the risk to the environment and human health. A basic education also helps farmers gain title to their land and apply for credit at banks and other lending institutions. An educated citizenry is vital to implementation, informed, and sustainable development. In fact, a national sustainability plan can be enhanced or limited by the level of education attained by the nation's citizen. Nations with a high illiteracy rates and unskilled workforce have fewer development options. For the most part, these nations are forced to buy energy and, in fact, manufactured goods on the international market with hard currency. To acquire hard currency, these countries need international trade. Usually, this leads to exploitation of natural resources. Good community-based decisions, which will affect social, economic, and environmental well-being, also depend development option, expand, and education increase. Citizens also act to protect their own community by analyzing reports and data that address community issues and help shape a community response. For example, citizens who were concerned about water pollution reported in a nearby watershed started monitoring the water quality of local streams. Based on their data and information found on the World Wide Web, they fought against the development of a new golf course, which would have used large amounts of fertilizer and herbicide and maintenance of the ground. Education is also essential to improving quality of life. Education raises the economic status of families. It improves life conditions, lower infant mortality, and improves the education attained for the next generation, thereby raising the next generation chance for economic and social well-being. It approaches that are particularly effective in the context of education for sustainable development tend to have enabling students to relate their learning to real-life problems and situations. There is likely to be a strong interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary element, reflecting the interconnected nature of many issues in the sustainable development. Experiential and interaction approaches are also particularly well-suited to education for sustainable development. Critical reflection on values and assumptions may be in some cases led to what is known transformative learning. In addition, participatory learning approaches, peer learning and collaboration within and beyond the classroom are encouraged, allowing students to expose to multi-perspective and enabling creative response to merge. Most students will have knowingly or unknowingly engaged in learning about sustainability through their previous formal education or through informal means that they have diverse value positions. It is therefore particularly important that prior knowledge and attitudes are taken into consideration in planning, teaching, and learning activities. Students learning for and about sustainability while in higher education is not limited to the normal curriculum. Wherever possible, teaching, learning, and assessment should take account of the informal and campus learning opportunities. As educators, we are encouraged to think about the possibility for innovative approaches to teaching, learning, and assessment within their discipline, taking account of any recommendation from professional, statutory, or regulatory bodies where relevant. As educators, we may find that some of these methods are already being used in some of the teaching, learning, and assessment methods set out in here, particularly where the focus is on trying to encourage students to see the bigger picture and development their own. As I had stated in the beginning, improvement and communication in ensuring that whatever policy are put in place at various institution level is coordination down to the grassroots or classroom to reducing repetition of what we do contribute effectively to sustainable development. From people's perspective, education sectors drive innovation, innovation drives productivity, productivity drives economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that education, both formal and informal, have direct linkage to productivity, economic growth, and better quality of life.
Madam Speaker, I am Donato Lamblamba. I am teaching in the St. Thomas's Primary School in Lautoka. And my question is concerning the PMEC subjects from primary to secondary. Is there anything, has there anything been done concerning PMEC subjects in order to diversify, in order to enrich it from the primary to the secondary and into the tertiary so that it would help sustain those who are not so good academically in terms of science, because in terms of job market, because since the exam has been reintroduced, these things seems not been examined. And would there be anything done in order to diversify these things from the primary, tertiary, and into society? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please, Professor Biman Prasad.
I think, Madam Speaker, that's an excellent question because that relates to the quality of school curriculum. I remember when I was a student, we never had Saturday classes. We had exams. We had very, very clear lessons on PMEC, music, gardening, arts. I think what has happened is the reintroduction of the exam and the rush by the Ministry of Education to produce some kind of big data national indicator of results has actually had a devastating effect on the quality. And the recent Class 8 results, if you see numeracy results, mathematics results, is about 41% pass only. So I think what is needed is a pause, and this is why I said that the Education Commission, made up of experts to look at how these changes have had an impact as opposed to what we had before, so that we can then look at the curriculum. And this is why I said that one of the things that SDG 4 emphasizes very clearly is quality and skills. And when you talk about quality, you talk about the quality of teachers and the quality of curriculum. And the curriculum has to be holistic. It must include all those things that you're talking about. And I'm sorry to say that I see a decline there was a parent who told me that they were not, the son was not going to play any sports because there was so much work in the school. And obviously, you know, they had to attend Saturday classes. So there must be something wrong with the curriculum in not dealing with those issues in a holistic manner. But the point you raised is a very important one. We must have that.
Thank you. Mr. Agnew Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Indeed, an excellent question. Broader education has been narrowed for the reason that Professor Biman has just given. But there is one other important point to make, and that is that teachers are now required to complete the curriculum in 2 terms. That curriculum is designed to be completed in 3 terms. And they have been instructed to complete the curriculum in 2 terms, and the 3rd term is only for revision and exams, because we really want to excel in exams. And there is this other fear that teachers are assessed based on the exam results. The teacher has 100 points, out of that 60 points are for 100% result. So if you don't get 100% result, you don't get your 60% assessment. So where do the teachers go? So I think we need to address these issues. The curriculum is designed to be completed in days, in lessons, in weeks, in months, in terms. And that has not been reduced. And now we have to get it completed within 2 terms. And on the ground, the teachers tell us that this is very, very difficult. You complete the work. Somehow you have to do it. But how much learning takes place is the question. Thank you. And that also impacts on physical education and other co-curricular subjects which are neglected. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I call on the next question, we've received a question through Twitter. And the question is, how does the high school curriculum increase critical and independent thinking? How does the high school curriculum increase critical and independent thinking? Professor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like I said, I'm sitting in place of the Minister of Education, but I have quite a bit of knowledge about what happens in secondary schools. I think the introduction of internal assessments and class-based assessments and research work for students is definitely going in the right direction, which allows students to do research and do critical thinking and come up to conclusions, etc. Project work in high school is has always been a very important component of certain subjects, especially English. And this allows students to go out and do a lot of research work and do some independent thinking, and then come back and present their paper to the teachers for assessment. And if you need further explanation, please leave your emails with me. I can forward it to the Minister of Education, and you will hear a response from him. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Prasad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's a very important question because the school system ought to generate that environment where there is critical thinking, where there is innovation, at least in the minds of the children. And I think that space that teachers and students need, in other words, that democratization within the school environment is very, very important. And again, that has to be linked with the kind of curriculum that puts out the whole learning and teaching psychology, not just within the classrooms, but also outside the classroom. And I think that's an area that needs a big attention, because what we have taken out from the school system is that democratization, that space for teachers and students and parents and other stakeholders to critically engage with each other. That is not happening. And I think we have to reverse some of the curriculum agenda that is there right now in terms of what Mr. Singh just said, that if you cram all these things and your focus is only academic result, then you will end up with neither producing the academic results nor producing that holistic development that kids need within a school system. And I think it's very important to look at where we are going and why it's not happening.
Thank you. To those who are listening in online, you may text in your questions to number 9908-957, 9908-957. And now I'll give the floor to this lady in the middle here in white. Yes, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this time.
Oh, sorry, miss.
Sorry. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this time, and I'd like to thank the panelists for the wonderful contributions so far. I would just like to side with Honorable Professor Biman Prasad, Mr. Agni Deo, and of course Nikki with her early childhood background and expert, and standing up for early childhood this evening. Yes, partnership is an issue. And consultation is very important for the early childhood fraternity in Fiji. Therefore, I would like this panel and Honorable Rosie Akbar, I know you can take this back and you will do it with an open heart, that we need, how can we, how are the year 1 and 2 teachers are prepared to take these children, these wonderful children that have been prepared over the years from home, which is early childhood education, from into the preschools or early childhood or play groups or whatever, to the years 1 and 2 classrooms. It's about getting the year 1 and 2 classrooms ready, not getting only children ready for this. So it's reversing the cycle and just trying to be a bit more proactive in receiving these wonderful children. Otherwise, we'll be doing more damage than harm.
Thank
Good.
you.
So she's saying for me to repeat, but I don't know whether the speaker will allow me to do that. But therefore, it just calls for partnership. Yes, we need to partner if we want quality curriculum review, quality teacher education programs. It has to begin from early childhood education. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You did mention, you did ask the Honorable Minister Akbar to take the issue to the relevant minister, and I'm sure she's taking note and she will take it to the Minister for Education. We had a hand up right at the back there. Right at the back. There. That's it.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My question, unfortunately, the Minister of Education is not present, but perhaps I could throw this to Honorable Rosie Akbar. The question is, why do students have to seek loans to go to university, and for toppers only, for those who qualify, and therefore the vulnerable ones are those who do not qualify? Why not bring back the Fijian Affairs Board scholarship and multi-ethnic scholarship? I believe many students would be assisted with this scholarship. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Sorry, thank you for the question. I think I did mention it, the reason why we have the toppers scheme, because we were trying to get rid of the racial divide that previously was there when you have scholarships awarded in terms of your race. And just give me 1 second. While I look for that, I think it's very important to note here, the topper scheme is basically to reward the top students of the country, and of course there are certain category of scholarships under the topper scheme, and that is based on the needs of our country. Okay, and students are free to choose the area of study. Coming back to your request as to why we cannot have the Fijian Affairs Board, I think it's very clear that we want, while we are promoting equal citizenry, we want to see everybody on the same forefront, and there is no question of dividing students according to race and giving them certain percentage. It's basically, if you deserve it, you get it. We are all Fijians, and when we talk about equity and equal access, the National Topper Scheme is clearly promoting that. And why do students have to take loans? Of course, this has been put in place to ease the burden of the parents. Previously, what parents would do is use the FNPF. They would borrow from the banks. But here we have a scheme where students can borrow under this scheme and pay when they start working. So if they start working after 3 years, they can start paying the government after 3 years. If they start working after 5 years, they can pay that. That's sort of taking responsibility as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bimala Prasad.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If I can just make a point on the Toppers scheme. And I know I mentioned this in Parliament once. I think the Toppers scholarship, any scholarship, is a good scheme. But this arrangement where only 600, and in fact not all 600 in any 1 year have been given scholarships, is very restrictive. And I'll explain to you why. Because in the previous systems, whether the scholarship was divided along ethnic lines, that's another issue. But the fact was that those scholarships were based on some kind of means tested. In other words, it was based on a category of income. So what is happening is students with very good marks, in fact, invariably, many of the students who get toppers actually need to have marks of more than 300. So you have, and schools are different. You know, some are good schools, some rural schools don't have the same kind of facilities, don't have the same kind of teachers. I know the minister is saying that they're trying to equalize that. But at the end of the day, if someone from Ba or someone from Bua, from say Bua Central College, gets a mark of 290 from a village or a settlement where they come from very poor families. Now that family, that kid will have to go and borrow. That particular kid may not have enough money to actually come to Suva. But having a 290 mark, for example, is a damn good mark for a school in a very rural setup. Kids coming from poor families. So what we are saying is extend the toppers scheme and make it, have the toppers, but make it also available to those who cannot afford to have, cannot afford to even take loans because they are already very poor. So I think there can be a very definite improvement in the way the toppers scheme is being applied.
Thank you. As a speaker, I do listen to the debate in Parliament, and there's something that I was very impressed about on the presentation, that previously, before this toppers and TELS scheme, there were about 4,000 students in Fiji entering university. But with this toppers and loan scheme, that has increased to about 15,000. Around about 15,000 students that now have the opportunity to attend the university. Thank you. Yes.
First of all, thank you, Madam Speaker and the panelists. Your presentations have been very informative. My name is Siddiq Koya. My question is, I just read a Fiji Times article. The results for the Class 8 students have come out. The pass rate is 65%. This is a drop from 70%. I understand the Education Minister is not here. This is his rugby field, but you all are very experienced in the education sector. I would like to hear your recommendations, learned recommendations, on economic reforms, education reforms, and basically policy reforms in how we can improve the pass rate. These are very young children. They need to pass, they need to get quality education. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Honorable Minister?
I think the question again brings home the whole issue of curriculum. And I can give you an example of a class 6 book, the new curriculum that the ministry has put out. And there was one particular issue in which the explanation was provided, but there was only one or two sentence explanation of the issue. And it showed to me that those engaged in developing the curriculum, new curriculum for class 6, class 8, have actually rushed into developing something which does not reflect in the way the students actually learn. Because the learning and teaching, psychology really has a lot of impact on how students learn. And so this is why I've been saying this very, very passionately in Parliament and outside Parliament, that some of the reforms, the contribution of the government, the good contribution that government can make to quality education is having quality teachers and quality curriculum. And right now, we have neither. Because if you look at the teachers, and Mr. Singh would agree with me, teachers have certain kind of status. They have a professional status, they have a social status, they have an economic status. And if you dilute any of those status, then the teachers don't have the motivation and the energy and the drive to actually work on the curriculum that you have. And on top of that, if you have a bad curriculum which does not reflect the learning needs of the children in different environments, then obviously you'll have problem. And the results for class 8, and especially maths result, does indicate to me a very, very obsessed focus on result, and thereby forgetting the learning and the teaching that is required as part of the whole process that will eventually produce the result. So, I mean, I can't give you a pointed answer, but my analysis of what is happening is this rush to concentrate and focus on results because you brought the exam and you want to show that somehow I'm producing better results. That's not the way you improve quality education, quality primary and secondary education in this country. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Agnes Singh.
Madam Chair, I'll just comment on two issues, curriculum and teacher-people ratio. I think teacher-people ratio is a very important factor that comes into play when you talk about quality education. We need more teachers because in the urban areas we have a ratio of 1:45, 1:50. Now, naturally, a teacher is more involved in behavior management than actually teaching with that kind of number. We need to reduce those numbers. We get to get a supply of quality teachers. Now, you don't do what was done in 2015. We had a budget for 300 teachers, but we took in 600 teachers by reducing their salary by half. Now, that does not answer the question. You want quality teachers, you need to have like quality status of the teachers, then you also need to, do the needful. So teacher-people ratio is very important because the last 10 kids don't learn anything in a class of 40 plus. They will not learn anything. They're probably listening to Chinese. Yes. And the second issue is curriculum development. The method of curriculum development in the past always had been that we would have high-achieving teachers with 10, 12, 15 years experience who would be HODs or assistant head teachers recruited to become curriculum writers. The curriculum would be written and teachers on the ground would be involved. It would be piloted in all areas. And then after the piloting and after the comments from the teachers, it would be improved. And then that curriculum would be implemented. That kind of consultation and the sense of belonging. Now, that is no longer there. We have curriculum writers who, with all due respect, I have nothing against them, who are very, very high academics from the university who have never had any teaching experience. So we need to relook at that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I say 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because I may not come back to you. So, number 1. No, over here. You're number 2. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think we have been talking about education, more about education and not its link with sustainable development, which is the theme. We've been highlighting what's happening in the primary school or kindergarten, high school, university. But there's much more to education than what happens in the classroom. It's what you do with that education in life that's important. Many of us have different degrees, but when you look at your life, you have done so much more apart from what you have learned. So I think what we do with that education, that's very important. That's what's going to contribute to sustainable development. And when you look around, there are many people, wonderful examples in Fiji. You'll see people who didn't even have a degree. But today they're in a company, a multi-millionaires are there, employ 1,000 people and contribute tremendously to the GDP of the nation. And if you look at the nations around the world, developed and developing nations, the small, medium enterprises contribute up to 20 to 25% of the national GDP. So if we recognize that, then these people who are there working out, they have to be empowered, they have to be educated also. Means training in entrepreneurship to help people develop into small, medium enterprises. We all understand the importance of that, but we don't see much happening there. So my question to the panelists is that, if you agree with me that that's an important area, what can we do so that the education that's given from early childhood to the university can be translated into sustainable development? Thank you.
That's an excellent question, and thank you for that. I'd like to bring the evidence again regarding the early childhood. Because again, James Heckman says that a critical time that shapes productivity is actually from birth to age 5. He brings back again everything to this critical period of time. And I know that you were saying what can be done with the education, but just this one single investment is going to build the foundation for getting to that. As I was saying that, when the children who have gone through this quality, and I want to emphasize the quality early childhood education, just for example, they were most of them were employed, most of them finished university, most of them were in stable marriages, and most of them had a sense of social responsibility, and on top of it, they were had less incidents with the law. So the whole criminal justice system expenditures that we have to spend was reduced to improve the economy. So this is what this investment did to make productive citizens to be able to return back. Now, I can only speak right now from the early childhood, but I also want to raise one other thing that, again, the research has been showing us, and that is not only building the mental and the cognitive, but again, Heckman says that there are things called character skills. He mentions character skills and cognitive skills that will go hand in hand. Character skills that will help become an individual who's attentive, individual who's motivated, an individual who has self-control, and an individual who's sociable. These will make the character skills and will turn the knowledge into know-how and the people into productive citizens. So I think, again, we are on the right track, but we have to sustain this being on that right track by making sure that the quality is ensured, it's in place, and the most marginalized are actually the ones that are really benefiting from it. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 2 question, gentleman in blue.
My question is, why is the Fiji government give a chance or the first priority to the preschool or the kindergarten a free education and not to the primary school or college or secondary school? Why? What reason? I want to know.
Thank you.
Thank
I think
you.
we've heard that there's free education to early childhood, preschool, and also the first 12 years, primary school, first 12 years of education is also free. Thank you. I think there's one at the back. There was somebody at the back there? Yes.
My name is Maria Rova. I'm a mother, first of all, a former primary school teacher, and now a freelance artist employing 14 young Fijians in the creative industries. And I just want to echo what has already been said by a couple of the panelists and the teacher from St. Thomas. If we're educating our children for life, what are we doing about preparing them for the creative industries, to participate meaningfully in the creative industries? And that is one sector of the international economy that in the 21st century has been earmarked as the boom growth area, creative industries. Yet Fiji's education system over the last 2 years seems to have done a U-turn and backtracked in preparing children to participate meaningfully in terms of learning how to problem solve, learning how to approach life with a creative, resilient mind, and being educated and given nurturing in developing their creative talents. That not only goes for children who cannot make the cut in other academic fields. The artistic development spans the whole area of intellect, and I would argue that you need to have an especially keen mind in order to be able to make use of the opportunities that are out there, especially here in Fiji, where our tourism industry provides so many opportunities for the tourism dollar to trickle down at grassroots level through people who are involved in small-scale enterprises as creatives. And at the moment, it's very hard to see how the education system is enabling and empowering our children and our young people to be part of that in the future.
Thank you.
My question is, how can that be turned around again? How can we address that in a more creative way?
Thank you, Professor Bimal Prasad.
Yeah, I think it's a very important question and linked to the earlier question with respect to, I think in the SDG 4, as I said earlier, one of the important words is skill development. And as I said also, again, it comes back to what's in the curriculum. How do we come about, or how do we actually get to a point of developing a system or developing curriculum right from primary school, preschool, right up to secondary level, so that we can inculcate or derive the creativity or expose the creativity that children have at different levels. And that creativity obviously can lead to innovation, to new ideas of doing things. And entrepreneurship is part of that overall set of skills that children learn over the period in which they are in the schools. And then obviously they take it up to the tertiary level and do that. So this idea of creative industries and creative skills to participate in those industries is an important one. And I think the SDG 4 actually recognizes skill development for entrepreneurship, for creativity, for innovation, and ultimately I think it will come about if we have the right curriculum. If the focus is much broader than the narrow focus and I like your observation that we are making so many ups and downs, and changes into the system in a very short period of time. And education is not something that, you know, you take it lightly. I mean, if you employ teachers for a year on $12,000 and say that you are experimenting and you're going to assess after a year, that's incredible. That's ridiculous, because you don't experiment on a child at any level, because especially if you are looking at the primary school. So I agree with you that we need to go back and relook at the curriculum. And I would say that what is needed right now, there are a lot of, and I agree with Minister Akbar, that there are good policies, and I've said this, you know, preschool, I agree with Nikki, bus fare scheme, you know, free education, making sure that people, all these are good policies. But if they are applied without any expert advice and results of research, then you can get it all wrong. And you could permanently damage the system, which could take a very long period of time to get back on track. And that is why I've been saying that the last education commission we had was in 2000. It's almost 15 years. There's been so many changes in the education system. We need to get back to that commission, get a set of experts to look at, analyze the results, and see where we're going, so that we don't continue in the dark. And I think the Minister for Education has to answer this, because he promised in his maiden speech that he was going to set up an education commission before he was going to embark on the reforms. Unfortunately, he's not done that and embarked on a haphazard reforms, and the effect of that is now evident, and in the long term, it could damage the whole education system in the country.
Thank you. In consideration of time, we need to be very succinct with your questions and also succinct in the responses, please. There was someone from the back there.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I would like to thank Ms. Nikki for her comment on that we must not marginalize children, that the marginalized children benefit from this initiative, and she was referring to the early childhood education, the free education scheme that is granted to the early childhood. In removing the barrier, not having to marginalize children from receiving that benefit, I believe I'm going to comment before I pose my question on what the gentleman that has just left the room,
Please, can you just ask the question? Be succinct with your question, please.
And,
can I have the question?
Okay, my question is, what handbook do controlling authorities use to guide them in using the free education grant? If it is available, why is it not available with the controlling authorities of schools?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Madam Chair, before if I can just take a couple of minutes to go back to the previous question. And I think the question was, how can we harness the creative side of our children? I think we've come a long way in the education sector, and the perception of education still remains the same. And that's why there's a lot of emphasis on academic results. And I think if we change that perception, including parents, to see that we really need to harness that creative side of our children, we can tap into that. But first and foremost, we need to do is to see where do we want education to take us. From preschool to primary to secondary, I think the end is tertiary and to the workforce. So those perceptions we need to change at the societal level to see how best the creative side of our children can be harnessed. Sorry, sir, coming back to your question, what are the guidelines for per capita grants? If you can leave your email with me. I don't want to give you misinformation, but definitely if you leave your email with me, I will gladly forward it to the Ministry of Education for that information to be forwarded to you. And anybody else who's interested in that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The middle there? Yes.
I have a question regarding inclusive education. My understanding is that a lot of progress has been made in Fiji recently toward inclusive education. I've seen new resource materials that have been developed in the last few years. My question is related to capacity building to go along with those things. So I'm wondering if the panel can help describe what plans are in place to provide additional training to classroom teachers that would be teaching in an inclusive setting so that they have the support necessary to teach all children with diverse needs in a general education classroom? And the second, related to capacity, is, are there any plans in place in Fiji to try to identify children with disabilities at a younger age, before age 4, before kindergarten, so that services could begin, early intervention services could begin from birth in Fiji? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that indeed is a very valid and a relevant question. Again, as a government, we are trying to bring about more inclusive education, whereby we need children with special needs included in mainstream classes. I do take note of your concern, and again, please allow me to provide you with an answer from the Minister of Education. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to ask a question. I have two in particular.
No, only one, please.
I'll pose two and they can answer whichever.
No, only one, please.
Okay, my first question, the only question, one question, thank you, is we are looking at promoting education, inclusiveness, and the rest of it through SDG 4. Then why there is a huge disparity in allocation of government grants to providers of education in this country, particularly at university level?
Thank you.
Well, obviously, Minister Akbar wants me to say something in which I did make some contribution during the budget. I think the question is a relevant one. All the tertiary education institutions are important, and I think they all need the support. As far as we as members of parliament are concerned, and some of us have articulated that view very well within the parliament.
Thank you. From what I hear in Parliament, it's really per child. It's a very standard amount. Per child in the primary, per child in the secondary, and per child in the tertiary. You're just talking tertiary only. Thank you. The back there.
Thank you, Honorable Madam Chair and panel of speakers. My question is on sustainability, on education. I have heard and also have seen that the class year 8 exam results have been out, and we have got 65% on the pass rate. I'm not concerned on the 35% who has failed this. My question is, what is the future of them? What are the plans or actions being taken to have these children moving forward for education up to year 12 or further? Thank you.
Actually, if we have teachers here that know the answers to these questions, just raise your hands. Because you are the very practical people that know exactly what is happening to this 35%.
Let me make a very brief comment, Madam Speaker. This is in response to what the Minister said. He's reported to have said that all those kids who have failed will be allowed to go into Form 3. But again, the question that arises is, okay, you've introduced the exam, you're talking about quality, you're talking about results. What was then the objective? I mean, if every kid that fails class 8 is allowed to go into Form 3, then what was the objective of the exam? I mean, we had in the previous system, when the exams were abolished by the same government in a different capacity, the idea was that the internal exams would do the trick in terms of measuring the performance and based on that remedial action and so forth, but everyone would be going into Form 3. Now, introducing the external exam and putting out all these resources to have that exam and produce the result, and then say that everybody will go to Form 3, it actually defies the logic. So I would say that we would have been better not having an exam, but having the internal exam and using those internal exams as a barometer, as a remedial action, and then put everybody into Form 3. Because it sends a very mixed signal, and for some of the students it could become a disincentive in the future.
Thank you. Yes. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to ask a question on zoning. It has not been addressed, but I'm interested to know what the panelists' views are on zoning. Thank you, so I can take it back.
Madam Speaker, this is why I said we would have loved if the Minister of Education was here. Well, I can only tell my views on it because I've made those views very public. Again, I think the zoning policy is a very typical example of the rush in which the Ministry of Education puts out policy. There have been a lot of flip-flops in terms of policy. After announcing the zoning policy, you look at the variations that the minister himself has come out, it almost makes zoning policy nonsensical because you announce a policy and then you have 10 variations and then you end up not having a zoning policy. The other issue is 99% of the schools in this country are owned, managed by cultural, religious and community organizations. There are different imperatives, different resources, although the government is trying to equalize that by giving grant, which is a very positive move. But at the end of the day, zoning policy, in my view, will take a long while before it works in Fiji. In other countries where states own 99% of the school, the resources, the equalization is there in terms of the environment, both in terms of resources, teachers, and other activities. It makes sense to have zoning policy. And it may well be that in future, someday when we equalize this, zoning policy would be understood better by these different actors, we could have it. But right now, I think it is nonsensical to even talk about it.
I think with the zoning, from what I know, that there's, we're talking about the teacher-children ratio. And there are certain schools in this country that are considered elite. And all the parents are sending their students to these schools so that the teacher-student ratio increase. And this is why the Education Ministry is trying to standardize and improve the quality of education in all schools so that there's no discrimination between the elite and not so elite. And I think the Ministry of Education is doing well in that respect. Thank you. There's one question at the back there. Yes.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. Just got a question to be answered. Firstly, according to the rehabilitation about the Ministry of Education, when is the deadline of Ministry of Education that they will complete all the damaged schools in the islands and also in the highlanders? We have noticed this, that some schools in the islands, they still have their classes in the tents. Can we have some clarification? When is the deadline of all schools will be completed come by 2017? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. That is a difficult question. The government is trying their best to construct all the schools that were damaged in the cyclone. But exactly when is the deadline? I don't think we have that answer right now. Suffice to say that everyone is working together to try and get schools out of their tents. That is for sure. There's one. I'll just point that way. Whoever stands up first can take it because there's so many hands up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We really appreciate the government's initiative to increase the teacher and student ratio by doing the zoning, as you mentioned, under the zoning policy. But there is a concern I have. For example, me and my wife both are working in town, and we live in the rural area. And my child going to a primary school will finish school at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And where do we keep our children at that time? With the neighbors. And if we are keeping that small child with the neighbors, and those children are being abused by people in the rural area, by the neighbors, or whoever is looking after that, who is going to take responsibility of my children's abuse at that age?
Do you have a recommendation as to what is to be done? Because that is your own personal experience. Do you have a recommendation that can be taken up?
I think the policy should be flexible for those parents who are, for example, working in the cities or in town. Their children should be given the right to come to the schools where the parents can pick up them at 3 o'clock and keep them with them in the office or in a daycare center which is available in the town. That is my recommendation.
Thank you. I'm sure we will take that up to the minister concerned. Thank you. That issue will be taken up. Yes, next question, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to comment on the question that was raised of that 35% students who have failed. I'm the principal of Sangam College.
No, I want question, please, no comments. What is it? You have a question?
As an educator, you said that you can assist in some of the questions.
Yeah, but that has gone.
Thank you.
In Parliament, you have to have immediate response to these questions. All those staff that have the microphone, please just give it to whoever is close to you. And just ensure that everybody else is given the chance to answer questions.
Madam Speaker, is there any policy concerning dyslexic students who will be sitting for exams that cannot cram things in the examinations because some of them cannot read? I was one of the students that could not read up to high school. Subramani Baswa once stated, and I quote, "It is either the system fails the child or the child fails the system." But I was able to learn later on through phonics by my own research, and I am a teacher now. But the question is there any policy concerning dyslexic students who cannot read and understand and comprehend, but can comprehend but cannot read in the classrooms? Is there any policy? Because by failing them, I think it is unfair. So we have to look at dyslexic students, people with special needs, sitting for extended examinations.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, my teaching experience for more than 2.5 decades and dealing with education in the last 2 decades, I can tell you the teachers have to teach one size fits all. They don't have a choice. They neither have the capacity nor the time because the class size, there's nothing for this variation of levels of learning ability of students. Unfortunately, that's the truth. That's the reality. Thank you.
But the issue is noted, and Honourable Minister will take it up to the Ministry. Anybody else? Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. I just have a question. I think so the child's development is through curricula and extracurricular activities. Madam Speaker, while enrolling a student to a prominent school in Ba, there was an enrollment form. And in that form, it stated there were certain clauses. And one clause said that I agree not to take any action, lawful or unlawful, against any of the school staff or management if my child receives any injury in the playground or any accident sustained during or while representing the school in any extracurricular activities. Just a question to the Ministry of Education, if those rules and regulations is vetted by Ministry of Education or the school makes their own rules and regulations. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Do you have an answer to that? Is there someone that can assist with that? If no assistance, please can you give our staff there your email address, and they will give you the email address when you. Can you give him the email address of Honorable Rosie Akbar? Is it? What is your email address? Can you please just let them know? She will just forward it to the Minister of Education. Your email address?
My email address, if you want my mobile number, you can 9904-475, text me. Email is rosie.akbar@government.gov.fj, but only professional emails, no personal. It's rosie.smallakbar@gmail, Gmail. I've even forgotten my email now. Okay. Sorry, I'll leave my card. My staff will come around with my card, and then you can
Thank you. Next question. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you for your statistics. You said that, in the previous years, there were about 4,000 or 5,000 students getting scholarships or graduating, and now there's an increase in number. There's about 15,000. I think that's excellent. But what I want to know is that, although we have so many graduates, but we still see that, more and more expatriates are hired for jobs which otherwise, locals can do. So is our education system actually contributing to our nation's sustainable development? I mean, I'm just going back to the theme, and I want to know, how does the education system actually link with the workforce? So what is wrong? Is it that our employers think our graduates are not quality graduates? That's why they get expatriates? Something is wrong with our education system? What is actually going wrong? And I think that's very important for us to think about if we want our country to develop economically. Thank you.
Thank you. We're taking note. Very important question. We're taking note, and perhaps the next speaker's debate will be on the employment and how we link education to employment, and your issue will be addressed then. But just before we go on to the next question, we have a few questions here that have been received, and I would like to quickly read them, and please, very succinct answers. One question: why have a warped policy like zoning when it is discriminatory? I think that is done. How can you assess teachers' performance based on percentage pass when all students who fail a level are all just waiting through to the next level? This has been answered as well? Yes, that has been answered. How many topper scholarship has been awarded to students from rural, remote areas? That is statistics. We will provide that if you can text it to 9904. Was it, what's the number?
9904-475.
9904-475. Listening out there, live stream, please text your, this question will be forwarded to the Minister of Education. How does the, I think this has been asked. And then lastly, it is, okay. That's the end of the questions that were texted in. Now we'll go back to the members of the public. Yes.
Madam Speaker, got a second question here. Consists of flip-flopping of policy under the Ministry of Education, said by the Minister of Education that schools that don't have enough students can enroll out of zone student. What about schools where grants have been cut off? Will the grants be restored, or it will be cut off again? What we want is the schooling zone system for the students. Since some of the schools, their grants have been cut off, will the grant be restored again, or be cut off?
Thank you.
Madam
I think
Speaker.
the education people are listening in, and that is a question that they will answer, and I will ask them to answer some of these questions through the media, because they're very factual question that needs factual answers. Thank you. Any other? Yes. Please, if you have asked question before, I'd rather you don't ask again. Let's have new people, because we've got time is going.
Good evening. This question has been asked formally by Dr. Biman Prasad, but what has not been asked about this question is, since external exams when students fail still reach Form 3, do we really need to look at another approach? Because I believe so. What does the panel think about this matter?
Thank you. The education people are listening in. I'm sure they will answer that through the media. Thank you. Last question, I'm afraid, because time has caught up with us. At the back there. And that is the last question, I'm afraid.
Just wanted to ask, with all the talk about external exams, that LANA was the kind of diagnostic test that people are talking about needs to be put in place of the external exams. So what do generally people think of LANA?
Thank you. I will ask the Honorable Professor Biman Prasad to answer that question.
Yeah, all I can say is diagnostic tests are very important. And I think when we abolished the exams some years back, the internal assessments and the internal examinations were, in a way, diagnostic, in a way that when students completed those particular years, then before that, before they actually went on to the next level, they were required to have those set of skills. And it was based on the judgments that teachers would make internally. And I think LANA was kind of designed to do that. That is why I said earlier that, what is the objective of bringing back exams in class 8 if you're now saying that after the results, everyone will go to Form 3? What about the stigma of those students who failed? I mean, did we need that? This is why I'm saying that a lot of the policies, in fact, I think the Ministry of Education is confused about reforms versus policy. A lot of the things that they're doing is just tinkering on policies. Reform is a much broader thing, and it requires a very, very careful thought, consideration, and that is why I keep talking about we need to look at the whole education system through an education commission before we progress on new reforms. And I think the minister should take a breather, take a little bit of breather and relax and get this education commission going and then start the reforms again.
Thank you. I will try to summarize very few points because all the things that have been mentioned, I'm sure you all know. But we have really the early childhood education, prioritizing the early childhood education we hear now. And we can see that the Ministry of Education is putting a lot of emphasis on early childhood education, given the end result of the education phase of a child's development up to youth and after school that has been highlighted by our panelists here. And also quality teachers has been highlighted, quality curriculum, this has been highlighted by all our panelists on this, and also what you do with education in terms of your livelihood. Those are just a few that I have noted down, but there are so many that I'm sure you are all aware of. And I will ask the Ministry of Education people that are listening in now that they have in some questions that we've left to you to answer through the media. And in that way, we'll be able to complete the information that has been requested through this debate. So again, please, I would like to say thank you very much to each and every one of our panelists here. There's been a lot of lessons to be learned from the development process of a person to early childhood, and also from the perspective of a student that is currently in school, on the teachers union and its partnership with education, with the Honorable Minister for Health, who is an educationist herself, and of course our very own Professor Biman Prasad that everybody knows about. Thank you all so very much. Don't go home. These panelists are available to you, and refreshment are being served. And that is where you could network and have further discussions on these issues.